This is Superior Sports Talk with Reggie Wilson and Luke Inman, part of Locked On Sports Minnesota, and it starts now.
Back in the lab, Reggie and Luke, back at it. Another episode of Superior Sports Talk presented by Locked On Sports Minnesota. What's going on, Reggie?
Man, it was a late night. Woo. Vikings said that they had to sweat it out a little bit, and so did we. We had to sweat it out till around midnight or so.
Man, that's one way to put it, certainly. We got plenty to discuss and break down from night one of the NFL draft and look ahead to rounds 2 and 3, where the Vikings now have 3 total draft picks. Plus, Twins are red hot with 7 in a row, and later I'm putting Reggie on the hot seat with What Does It Mean? It's all coming up on Superior Sports Talk. But first, make sure to check out our other daily show on Locked On Sports Minnesota. It's the Ron Johnson Show, featuring former Gophers and NFL receiver Ron Johnson and producer Sam Ekstrom. Get the daily opinions of an athlete turned broadcaster. Ron Johnson tells it like it is, whether it's Vikings, Gophers, Wolves, or Twins. Subscribe to Locked On Sports Minnesota YouTube channel or podcast feeds so you never miss an episode. Well, after reading about 600 mock drafts, listening to all the draft experts, tapping into the rumors and the buzz circulating around round 1, it's safe to say, as we expected, the only thing we knew for sure was nothing was for sure. Nobody knew anything. The draft started last night with the first 10 picks going according to plan from a player standpoint, just in a completely different order than many would have guessed. And then with the 11th pick, it started to get wild. The first trade of the night happened with the Saints moving up with the Washington Commanders to grab wide receiver Chris Olave, one of 7 receivers who would hear their name called last night. And the start of a night fueled by trades, ending the round with 9 total trades. It was enough to keep your head spinning with one of the fastest paces I've ever seen in round 1, just pick after pick, trade after trade. Then we got to the 12th pick, and my gosh, Reggie, all hell broke loose. In a blink of an eye, boom, the Detroit Lions were now on the clock with the Vikings moving all the way back 20 spots to pick 32. The Lions sprinted the card in. They ended the night with Aiden Hutchinson and Jamison Williams, top 2 players at their respective position, while the Vikings were forced to watch big name after big name get sniped. Jordan Davis goes next. Kyle Hamilton followed. It was gut-wrenching for some fans as we spent the last few months targeting those players specifically, and to have them available and there for the taking, only to move all the way down. That stung, I think, for a lot of fans. In the end, though, Lewis Cine was the name on the card, safety out of Georgia, who I actually really like, Reggie, and we'll get into that in a moment. But for fans, they were left scratching their heads as Kwesi's first draft move as general manager. They felt a little robbed in the value of the trade down and the fact that if you're going to take a safety anyways, why not just take the number 1 guy in the class, Kyle Hamilton?
Yeah, it was perplexing, but it seemed to be that Kwesi and the Vikings brass valued the picks more than they valued the player at that time. We asked them last night. We were like, look, you know, Jamison was there. He was like, yeah, we actually loved Jamison Williams. We were really high on him, and we thought about it. And it's like, well, Jermaine Johnson was there. It was a slide that many really didn't even see coming, and he goes to the Jets at 26 just to steal. And then Kyle Hamilton, I mean, I guess thank the Lord he didn't go in division anywhere. He went to Baltimore, and that was cool. But it was so interesting that, like, how the board played out, it was unlike any mock draft, I think, that we had seen at all. Mm-hmm. And it was funny because Olave went, and it was like, oh, okay, you know, back-to-back Ohio State receivers, and then all of a sudden at 12, it's like, all right, the Vikings, here they go. Like, they got their pick of the litter almost, you know what I mean? And it's like, wow, the Lions are on the TV right now. It says the Lions are on the clock. The Vikings really didn't trade in division, did they? And it's just so funny because, you know, Kwesi was talking about how he was talking to Brad Holmes, the GM of the Lions, and, you know, they discussed trading with each other, and they were like, look, just because we're in the division doesn't mean that we can't do deals with each other. And it was just like, that's an interesting approach. But it's just so interesting that with so many guys on the board at great value at the time that they decided to trade back 20. It was just like, look, not only did they trade back, they didn't trade back a little bit. They traded back to the very end of the round. And it's just so interesting because it's like, man, you just don't know how the board is going to play out. And I know you have all these different scenarios and things like that. And they got Lewis Cine, who they're very high on, they're very excited about. And that's cool and all. But it's just like, man, like, you had Kyle Hamilton there for the taking if you were looking for a safety. And this guy has, all the skills to make so many people believe that he's going to be a dynamic player in this league for a long time. But the Vikings feel the same way about Lewis Cine, even though, they're high on Cam Bynum. Harrison Smith is still, Harrison Smith. You know what I mean? Like, he's still doing his thing there. And you just wonder, they still had Andrew Booth Jr. there on the board, which, with everything we've seen, he still looks to be in play for pick 34 as well, unless someone trades up to 33 to snatch him up. And so it's just so interesting. Like, you were waiting on this new Vikings brass to take a splash and really kind of, make their mark. And their very first big move was to move down 20 spots. And it was very anticlimactic.
Certainly, Kwesi had a plan, right, and made a bold move, a bold decision. And with bold moves and bold decisions is going to come a lot of criticism. He's going to take a lot of heat and a lot of questions because here's what naysayers are going to say, Reggie. They're going to say, do you want one guy that you know is a slam dunk for the next 10 years, or do you want two, a little bit more question marks? Yeah, you're getting two players in a pretty deep draft, but two question marks, not so much sure things as a guy like Kyle Hamilton, Jordan Davis. I mean, there's a long list of names they could have chose that Vikings fans would have been very happy with. How about Jameson Williams too? But again, do you want one slam dunk pick for the next 10 years? Or do you want two guys that maybe when we look back in 5 years are struggling to even make the roster? We don't know. But again, it could all be part of a bigger plan. I'll say this about the pick, Lewis Cine. He's a really good football player. Vikings got a player who was the team leader on a star-studded, talent-filled Bulldog roster that he led the team in tackles, led the team in passes defended. He was the MVP of that national championship game. He really showed up, if you watch the tape, during the playoffs when the lights were the brightest. He's NFL ready from day one. Pencil him in. You got to find a way to get him on the field and be a starter. Maybe it's 3 safety looks. Maybe Cam Bynum. He's got some versatility going back to his Cal days in college. He can play a little bit of cornerback. You find a way to get him on the field, no doubt. He's lightning in a bottle. And when you flip on the tape, you watch him, you see that 4.37 speed you saw at the combine. He's one of these new hybrid safeties that you let fly around the field in the box and help contain a lot of these mobile quarterbacks that just run the league now. So I'm really happy with that. On top of all that, he'll hit you like a ton of bricks, man. He's not the biggest guy, but, man, either was Harrison Smith coming out too. Not comparison to Harrison Smith, but, again, don't let the size fool you. Great tackler in space, and, again, I think he'll translate very well into the NFL with that tough demeanor he plays with. I mentioned before, it's right around where he was supposed to go. In fact, I can almost guarantee you I got a Bucs insider who said the Bucs, had they not traded back, we're going to take him with that 31st pick. So I think the value was right for that pick. What we're going to talk about is that maybe lack of value moving all the way back like that for just a third-round pick is just a tough pill to swallow. Maybe Kwesi's got a bigger plan. Maybe he's got more tricks up his sleeve. Again, I mentioned this was a great class. We talked about that all week with guys like Ron Johnson, Jeff Risdon came on the show, Arif Hassan. It's a great draft to have extra day 2 picks, no doubt. And the Vikings now have 3 of them. But when you compare the trade to others we've seen in the past, just real quick, Reggie, here's an example. The Cowboys moved back last year from 10 to 12, 2 spots, and they got a third-round pick. The Vikings moved all the way back 20 picks, and they got a third-round pick, essentially. I know they moved up 10 spots in the second round as well. Let's see again how the rest of this thing shakes out. Kwesi's got a bigger picture plan we don't know about yet. There's still a lot of big names left on the board. You mentioned a few of them: Andrew Booth, David Ajabo, Nakobe Dean, Roger McCrary, Kyle Gordon. Which direction are you guessing the front office goes with this second pick in round 2, or what's the general game plan with 3 picks tonight?
So I want to go back to what you were saying. It's so interesting that they decided to trade back. And there were a lot of fans and even some media members who thought that they didn't get enough for as far as they traded back. I mean, 12 is a pretty premium pick when you saw who was on the board at the time. And a lot of people were saying that maybe they shouldn't have given up pick 46 in that deal. You know, if you're gonna give up draft picks, you know, maybe you just give up that 12th pick and then you still get the return that you got.
Absolutely.
And I mean, you dropped 20 places
in the first round. It's not like you dropped 20 places, you know, on day 3. In the first round, Reggie, that's
dropped 20
serious
spots.
value. Serious value.
And so, look, there were a lot of people that had Andrew Booth Jr. being possibly a back-end first-round pick. And so, to answer your question, I think that the Vikings, like I said, should see him in play at pick 34. But I think from everything that we saw yesterday, it's trust nothing. You know, even if it looks like that is the right thing to do, I don't know if you trust the Vikings to make that pick. Maybe they go in a totally different direction. They could go Boye Mafe at 34. You just never know. And so I think what's interesting is, like, I was going to say this about the offseason that they've had so far. They seem to believe, and everything that they have done kind of shows that they feel like that they are close from a competitive standpoint of getting over the top. You know, they've done, you know, re-signing Kirk Cousins, you know, signing Za'Darius Smith. You know, they didn't blow this thing up. They re-signed Patrick Peterson. You know, everybody's making jokes like, okay, yeah, they seem content to run it back. And they seem to have the confidence that with a different, you know, mindset, different culture, different coaching, that this team could compete and make a play in the playoffs. And I think that this move in the draft just kind of goes along with that narrative. It's like they had a chance to get a premium pick at 12, and they decided to trade back. It seems to believe that they felt good with the spot that they're in, that they didn't have to force a decision or make a decision that they weren't, you know, specifically just too keen on making. And they decided, oh, we'll trade back and we still like our options there. Like, that's seemingly operating from a position of strength. And I think that frustrates fans, seeing how the last several years have played out, and also seeing that you go from a GM and Rick Spielman, who was known for trading down for value, and it seems like Kwesi one-upped him. Not only did they trade down, they traded all the way down.
We wake up this morning feeling like we're missing something. There's got to be more to this plan here because, like you said, I was fine with it before I found out they gave up the second round pick 46 as well. I was cool with it. I was fine. Great draft to have 4 picks today. But there's got to be more to it. And when I look at this second pick in the second round, pick 34, that's still a premium pick. I mean, that's basically a late first round pick. And with the lack of quarterbacks that went, I still feel like maybe there's a plan to just commit to this trade back philosophy and try to get more value out of that 34th pick, move back again, grab a couple more picks. Maybe a QB needy team wants to trade up for Malik Willis or Sam Howell or Matt Corral. There's a lot of them still sitting there. I have a hard time believing that it was just moving back that far in the draft, like you said, passing on premium players, blue chip type of players, day one, 5-7 year starters for a guy like Lewis Cine, who, again, no knock on him. I think he's a day one starter, but again, it just didn't seem like they got the value. And that's what we talked about all week. It's all about value in the draft. And we won't know for 3, 4, 5 years till the dust settles. We look back, but it didn't feel like they got the right value. Let's see what they do with this 34th pick, if they use it on a player or if they move back. Now, when you look at the rest of the league and what they did, a lot of big moves and trades. A.J. Brown goes to the Eagles, monster $100 million deal contract already on the table waiting for him. Hollywood Brown goes to the Cardinals to help out Kyler Murray. But the other teams I thought had a huge round one impact had to be the Ravens, coming away with Kyle Hamilton at 14. Just feels like you can go ahead and start making a Hall of Fame bust right now. Just a typical classic Ravens pick in the middle of the round, letting the draft come to them, seeing who falls in their lap. And then Tyler Linderbaum. A lot of people said the best center prospect to come out in years, but the Jets made big waves as well. Sauce Gardner, your guy. Garrett Wilson, your other guy, trading back for Jermaine Johnson, my guy. It means that's 3 big-time talents and starters they went home with. For better or worse, winners or losers, who else stood out to you last night?
Really, my thing is, it was funny. I was listening to Freddie Coleman last night on the way home, and there was a guy on, and he was just like, who would have thought? The Lions, the Jets, you're talking about them being winners of the draft. I mean, and you look at it, and they are, man. The Lions get Aiden Hutchinson, and I know Luke Braun was not a big fan of him yesterday, but
called him a little twerp.
I know. I was like,
he's a little twerp.
Dang. I was like, dang, dude. Like, okay, don't let Aiden catch you in the street. But, but I think them coming away with that, and then coming away with Jameson Williams as well. You know, we probably won't see him until midway through the season, but you're talking long-term with this guy. And you got a guy who can totally take the top off of a defense if Jared Goff doesn't overthrow him. And so I think we're talking about them. We're also talking about the Jets. And, I mean, for what they got, I think the Giants made out well as well. I mean, how about the NFC East, man? Like, you know, Philly comes in and gets A.J. Brown. Like, that's a very significant trade when you talk about now them having Devontae Smith and then A.J. Brown on the other side. Like, Jalen Hurts is about to hurt him this year. You know what I mean? Like, this draft was chaos. And it was the good kind of chaos. And it was also the unexpected kind of chaos. But that is the NFL draft experience. And, man, it's so funny because we saw all this movement. I don't think anybody was expecting to see these wide receivers moved, but it makes sense considering what the market has been this offseason. No quarterbacks. Baker Mayfield is still on the Browns. Jimmy Garoppolo is still on the 49ers. Like, one quarterback was taken overall in the draft last night by the Steelers, and that was it. Like, that was kind of crazy to me last night.
Yeah, we sat here 2 weeks leading up to draft. We all said it. This is not a great quarterback class. If you needed one, you missed out last year, 5 in the first round. If you need one this year, you might as well just wait and stockpile this year for next year, loaded class next year. But we all knew that, and then we followed that statement up with, but it's the NFL. It's a quarterback-driven league, most important position in sports. Watch, there'll still be 3 or 4 quarterbacks being drafted on round 1. That was not the case. Teams stood back, they stood pat, and they didn't force it. And I don't know what's going to happen now in these first 10 picks. Now that the dust settles on night 1, teams have a chance to kind of hit the reset button, reevaluate their boards, and start making calls these next 24 hours. And I'm expecting a little run here on these quarterbacks. Again, Malik Willis should go real early soon. Sam Howell, North Carolina, was rumored to go in the first round. Matt Corral. Desmond Ritter, the other guy. I would assume these first 10, 15 picks, there's a little bit of a run. I wouldn't be surprised if 3 of them went early on, especially when you look at the order. There's some quarterback needy teams that at this point you should take a shot on for sure. Wild and crazy first round. We knew it was going to come. New England Patriots, Bill Belichick. He's going to Bill Belichick. Takes Cole Strange. Cole Strange in the first round?
I know.
I mean,
kind of strange.
whoa. Okay. Yeah. But again, that's just what we're used to with the Patriots. Last
Exactly.
one before we move on, I just want to talk about, because you already touched on the Lions. Man, that's going to make huge ripple effects, huge waves, impact and influence this NFC North for a long time, for better or worse. But what you think about the Packers? Everybody just assumed, I mean, they're not going to take just one. They're going to take 2 wide receivers. And we talked about it. It's a deep receiver class. They'll certainly dip into that pool later on today, but no receivers taken. They take a linebacker from Georgia, not named Nakobe Dean, and they take another Georgia defender, a really boomer bust prospect, in Devon Wyatt. I mean, how surprised were you with the Packers' 2 selections, knowing that we just assumed they would go wide out?
So it was interesting because a lot of people were trolling the Packers. And what you may not remember is Devontae Adams was a 2nd-round pick.
Oh, yeah. Fresno State, Derek Carr connection. Yep.
And so I think it may be a little arrogance or maybe just some confidence, but I think that they feel like Aaron Rodgers can make the best out of any receivers that he has. And, you got Sammy Watkins going there, which, I'm not sure what to think about him. I think he is a good wide receiver, but the problem with him is health. And he's just gotten beaten down over these last few years to the point where now he's bounced around teams. And I think he can be good for them. But I also think that they probably feel like they could get some value here in the 2nd or 3rd round with the wide receiver. And working with Aaron Rodgers, he could take that receiver to the next level. And we've seen it with him in the past. He's throwing to guys like Jeff Janis. He's just like, who is that? But, all of a sudden he's having a big game. Alan Lazard, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, who just got paid by the Chiefs. And, he was just a guy, at some point. And so I think they feel confident that they can mold someone to be Aaron Rodgers, like next Devontae Adams or something like that. I mean, it's hard to replicate a Devontae Adams, but these receivers are coming out so talented and skilled these days in the draft. And we see, what the market is like for them. They feel like maybe they can get better value from a receiver, maybe in the 2nd or 3rd round. What I think it signifies is they felt like they had a defensive problem. They get 2 guys in Quay Walker and Wyatt, and they are trying to get after it on the defensive side of the ball because they are confident that with Aaron Rodgers being the quarterback and the pieces that they have on the other side, that they'll be fine on offense. But what they want to do is be a bully on defense and compete with teams. I mean, you look at that game that they played against the 49ers in the playoffs, like it wasn't pretty. The offense didn't necessarily have a good game, but, the defense needed some help. And I think what they did was call in the reinforcements on that side of the ball and help themselves really be able to compete. Maybe if the offense isn't humming like in years past, they can go ahead and just bully teams on the defensive side of the ball and maybe play them to, and this is just even crazy to fathom, but maybe play a team to a 10-6 score at the end of a game, and I think that's kind of crazy to think about and crazy to believe. But I mean, guys like Quay and guys like Devontae, I mean, those guys can be some bullies on the defensive side of the ball, and they can cause some havoc if those guys develop in the way that you think that they could and they kind of live up to their upside. And so those are pretty good value picks for them. I know a lot of people were kind of poo-pooing on them, kind of laughing at the picks like, oh my God, but at what point in that round, based on where they were picking, did you see them getting a receiver? Like, what receiver did you expect them to get with where they picked on those 2 times? Like, it probably would have been a bit of a reach.
We say it all the time. Let the draft unfold and come to you. Take BPA. And I think it speaks volumes to the luxury you have when you have a premium top flight quarterback that, as you mentioned, can make average to above average wide receivers look and play so much better than maybe just a middle tier quarterback. And that's what the Packers have done with Aaron Rodgers. I like also what you mentioned, just speaking on again, Aaron Rodgers getting up there in age. What's he got? 2-3 great years left. The style of his play certainly is going to start to change here a little bit. It's not going to be throw it 50 times a game or scramble 12 times a game like we're used to. They're going to try to play a lot more defensive front, defensive heavy football. When you look at that front seven now with Kenny Clark, Devondre Campbell, Rashawn Gary really came on last year. And then you had two more young pieces from that dominant Georgia defense who broke record with 5 defenders going in the first round. Quay Walker, Devontae Wyatt, boomer bust prospect. With 2 first-round picks, we're going to maximize our value, and we're going to dip into that wide receiver pool later on. Sky Moore, Christian Watson, George Pickens, there's tons of them, Reggie, and I'm sure they'll dip into that, a la what they did, again, as you mentioned, with Devontae Adams. It's going to be a lot of fun, man. We're going to be back here Monday to recap the rest of the draft, rounds 2 through 7. Again, Vikings have 3 picks today. Who knows? Maybe they'll end up with more than that as Kwesi tries to outdo Rick Spielman in the trade department, something that a lot of fans didn't expect. All right. Time has come, my favorite part of the show. I'm putting Reggie on the hot seat, covering all the latest hot topics in Minnesota sports called What Does It Mean? Let's jump right into it. First up, Twins won their 7th in a row with the sweep of the Tigers, allowing just 1 run while scoring 7. Carlos Correa broke out of his slump with 3 hits and 3 RBIs. What does it mean for the Twins in their recent streak? Is it a legitimate sign of things to come, or are we seeing a little bit of a mirage here given their pitching? How long until that bullpen starts to become exposed like we expected?
I mean, they've already been exposed. You know, I think this is the team. You know, they're going to have some ups, they're going to have some downs, but I think at their best, they can be a team that can string along 7 straight wins. I think the starting pitching is a lot better than many were expecting them to be. And I think the bats, they have enough experienced bats to believe that they would break out of any type of a slump that they would have. I mean, Carlos Correa, you know, you signed him to be really a pillar on this team this year, and he didn't come on very strong, but I feel like last night was a good sign for things to come for him moving forward. And I mean, this guy's a top flight player, and I think, you know, the encouragement from Byron Buxton and his great play so far, and Correa coming on, and you got guys like Max Kepler contributing, and the starting rotation has been strong. You still got Sonny Gray that's on the injured list that's going to come back and join that rotation. That's pretty encouraging. I think this team can really, like, legitimately make a run in this division and make it hard for, you know, the White Sox. You know, we've seen that they swept the Tigers. And that's what you expect this team to do with the talent that they have assembled. And I think this team has all of the makings to be able to make a run and do what it is that you hope that they do with the championship expectations that were kind of laid out before the season by this team. And so I think it's really fun right now, this streak that they're on, and I just want to see how long they could keep it going.
Really going to be interesting as we get later in the season, kind of the thick of things in the middle of the summer, and see where this team stands in that division. Next one up, 5 Georgia defenders go in the first round, the most defenders ever from one program on day 1 of the draft. What does it mean when trying to analyze just how good was that Georgia defense?
I think they were really
Is that one
good.
of the best ever?
It might be. It has to be. We've seen so many like Alabama players taken in the draft, but the fact that this Georgia team kind of set a record with the guys that they had getting taken in the first round, like that makes it really seem like, yeah, this is probably the best defense that we've ever seen. You know, the LSU offense when Joe Burrow played, that was otherworldly, and we saw all of those guys get to, I mean, you got Burrow, you got Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Thad Moss, like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, like all these guys are going pro and going good. You know, I mean, Thad Moss wasn't a high draft pick, but, you know, everybody else was. And so I think what's interesting is this defense, there's a premium on defense because there are a lot of high-powered offenses in the NFL. And I think, when you have a successful college program, when you have a successful college season, the NFL guys are like, ooh, let us get some of that. He can help us. And they have that, I hate to say, they have that championship DNA, going to the national championship and winning it with Georgia. And I think, those are guys who have done it before. They have that fabric. And those are guys that you feel like could be a great addition to your football team because they've been there, done that, and they know what it is to play at a high level.
It's so hard from a draft evaluation standpoint, Reggie, because devil's advocate just says, well, is that guy really that good, or did he just have so much talent around him? I mean, when you're a linebacker and you got Jordan Davis, Devon Wyatt blocking in front of you, are you really that good? I mean, are you going to be able to translate that to the NFL? But the amount of talent, again, on that side of the ball, just unheard of. Again, broke a record last night. And by the way, I know you're going to love this, Reggie. 2023 NFL mock draft, Lorenzo Carter, defensive end from Georgia, projected in the top 5. So they had another guy already projected in the top 5, top 10. Yeah, okay, not yet. Too soon? Too soon. We won't go there. Okay.
No.
Next one, last one. What does it mean? The most tumultuous wide receiver offseason we've ever seen resulted in A.J. Brown to the Eagles, Hollywood Brown to the Cards, Tyreek Hill to the Dolphins, Devontae Adams to the Raiders, Amari Cooper to the Browns, Allen Robinson to the Rams, and 7 wide receivers drafted in round 1. What does it mean when viewing the landscape of this position now in the NFL? It seems like there's 2 philosophies. Either draft them and pay them rookie money, or go get a blue chip, a top-tier elite wide receiver and pay him all that money.
It's just so funny how the narrative has shifted. Because back in the day when you took a top 5 wide receiver, it was just like, whoa, that's way too high for a guy. But, I think what we've seen is having a top flight wide receiver does do great things for your team. I remember back in the day, Colin was saying that having a top flight receiver would not win you a Super Bowl. And he started listing all these teams who had dominant number 1 receivers, and he kind of listed when they would exit from the playoffs or they wouldn't make the playoffs altogether. And so his thing was you don't pay for this receiver because that receiver doesn't necessarily affect how you win or lose championships. And so it's just like, well, that seems to be a different story now. And I think what's interesting is you look at the Rams when they won the Super Bowl, they traded for OBJ. When the Chiefs won the Super Bowl, they had Tyreek Hill. And when the Bucks won the Super Bowl, they had Antonio Brown, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, like all these guys, Gronk. Having pass catchers in the NFL is very significant. And it does affect the wins and losses. And what I think we've seen is that there are a premium, even in all those trades for receivers that you mentioned. When the Titans traded away A.J. Brown last night, it was just like, what are they doing? What's going on? What? And then you remember, you're like, oh, yeah, the Titans traded for Robert Woods, who's coming off the ACL. But, I mean, he was a very, very productive wide receiver for the Rams before he got hurt. And so what you're seeing is, and it's just so interesting because all these people were like up in arms when teams who needed a wide receiver weren't taking a wide receiver. It just kind of shows you how that narrative has shifted now to where you're like, look, if you want to be a top flight offense, if you want to be a dominant team on the offensive side of the football, you need a dude. You need a dude that's going to take the top off of defense. You need a dude that's going to go up and grab those 50-50 balls. You need a dude that is going to go and grab you a first down when you need one. And that showed. And I think what's tough is the market is getting reset thanks to the Jaguars signing Christian Kirk this offseason to that massive deal. And people are just like, what? You did what? And it's just, it's so interesting, too, that the Ravens already needed wide receiver help, and they traded their top guy to Arizona.
Right.
Which seems to believe that they feel like they can get someone else who can come in and work well with Lamar Jackson and kind of take them over the top. I don't know if that's the best idea, because now you've got a guy that needs to come in and get chemistry together with Lamar Jackson, and that team has championship expectations. But I think what we've seen is that rookies, you look at what Jamar Chase did last year. You look at what Justin Jefferson did the year before that, Terry McLaurin, the list goes on and on and on. Devontae Smith last year. And you see that these guys are making immediate big impacts. And I think that's what these teams are hoping for with these receivers. And they're like, look, if we don't have to pay a guy, I think we can get someone in the draft and do just as well.
What changed the last 5 years? The rules. The rules have favored the offense and the passing happy league. That's why you see 3, 4, 5 wideouts on the field so much and teams passing it 60, 70 times a game, teams scoring 40, 50 points. The rules have changed in their favor, and going to be interesting again to see where these receivers end up going and to what teams later on today. All right, he survived the gauntlet once again. Back here Monday morning breaking down Wolves Game 6, Twins, Wild, and of course, the rest of the NFL Draft. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel and join us every day for another episode covering all the biggest topics in Minnesota sports. He's Reggie Wilson. Follow him on Twitter at Reggie Wilson TV and on Care 11. I'm Luke Inman on Twitter at Luke_Spinman. Tune in tomorrow to Superior Sports Talk, part of Locked On Sports Minnesota. For Reggie, I'm Luke. Signing
Be
out.
blessed. Spread love this weekend.
This is Superior Sports Talk with Reggie Wilson and Luke Inman, part of Locked On Sports Minnesota.